Ross, thanks for coming along today to talk about Peerwise. Can I start by asking you a little bit about the courses that you teach, that you use it on?
Yeah, so I've used Peerwise mainly with my introductory physics courses in the School of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Edinburgh. So they are first year courses and they're designed to cater for people who are doing a physics degree, but also people who are not. They may be chemists or engineers or something and are doing physics as an outside subject. So we have this dual class, if you like. It's a first year Scottish system, so you could consider that like year zero for the rest of the UK. The class size varies, but it's typically somewhere between 200 and 300 students.
Okay. And I've mentioned Peerwise already, but can you describe quickly what it is?
So Peerwise is an online system. Fundamentally it's a website, but what it lets you do is you can log on and then submit multiple choice questions to the website. The students can do this. So it's not something necessarily that instructors put questions in, it's designed for the students to submit their own questions. So once the questions are into the repository online, you can search for other students' questions, you can answer them, you can see the various choices that they've given for the multiple choice answers. You can click the one you think is correct, you get to see their explanation if you agree with them, you can leave them comments. The whole thing is anonymous, so there's no pressure on the students to necessarily get things right all the time. It really is a space where they can submit their ideas for questions and they can try out other people's, have conversations about what they've submitted. And there are various things there, like leaderboards and badges that you can build up. So there really is a lot of features that allow students to really get the most out of this.
Okay, interesting. You've maybe answered my next question, which was, why did you decide to use it?
Well, I guess there's a number of motivations for why we wanted to use the system. One of the major ones was, I think, something that lots of people will identify with, which is that the students are always asking for us more practice questions to do for the course, and you can come up with questions as an instructor, but doing that can be quite a labour-intensive process, and so this seemed like a good way to distribute that task out back to the students, because coming up with questions for other people to answer builds up this repository of course questions to try. But actually what we think is that the process of writing the questions in the first place is itself excellent study practice for the students, because it forces them to think carefully about what they know, what they don't know, how people might go wrong. And so really the process of developing the questions we think is educationally beneficial, and that's also an important motivation for using the system.
Okay. And how easy is it to use?
We found the system extremely straightforward. From an instructor's perspective, it's very, very easy to use. And also the students seem to take to it without any trouble at all. It's a very explorable system. It's sort of obvious how everything works. To the extent that we don't feel the need to train the students on how to mechanically use the system. I mean, we don't say press this button to make it do that thing. It has lots of online help, it has tutorial videos and things, documentation you can look at. And we find that the students have no difficulty at all using it. They just take to it and it's no problem.
And is it an administrative burden for staff using the system?
The admin burden is very low, so setting up a new space for your class is literally a 60-second job. Very, very quick to do. And then once it's off and running, I can't resist the urge to look in every so often, but there's not really that much administrating that you have to do. And so really it can take as little as much time as you want, but it's not got a substantial overhead. It really is very quick.
Sounds fascinating. So in your experience, what do you think are the key factors that make it successful? What do you do that makes it work?
Okay, well, I think there are a few things. I think firstly it's very, very important to introduce the activity properly to the students through a process that we refer to as scaffolding. So what you're asking the students to do is to create their own materials, particularly their own questions. And this is probably something that they don't have experience of doing, they've maybe never done in the past. And so to just say, here's a system, off you go, write your own questions. Understandably, the students might not know what's expected of them, they might not know exactly how to go about this. And so we think it's really important to start off with a series of activities for the class that really lay out for them what makes a good multiple choice question, what makes a bad one, how to choose the incorrect answer options, what kind of questions we're looking for. So we want to go a bit beyond just really simple factual recall questions and ask them to focus more on applications or basic problem solving or something like that. So we think that's quite important. Other factors that might come into it, we tend to associate a small amount of course credit with doing the activity for motivational purposes mainly, to try to encourage the students to join in with that. And I think also it's important when you're introducing the system to make it clear that you're taking it seriously. This isn't a gimmick, it's not just a fun throwaway thing, but that you really believe that it's educationally beneficial, and that you maybe tell the students about this so that they also understand that you're taking it seriously.
And conversely, are there any pitfalls that you've come across?
So our experience has been fairly smooth, actually. We've found that it's worked reasonably well. I think something to be wary of is to resist the temptation to meddle. It's very difficult sometimes to force yourself to draw back. You might see a student submit something that's incorrect, and the natural temptation is to think, oh, I must go in and leave a comment and say, oh, this is wrong. But I think my opinion is that you should try to avoid doing that partly because pragmatically, very often other students come along and point this out anyway, and I think that's a really useful and beneficial learning experience. And partly because I think you might inhibit the students if they felt there was some mysterious instructor peering over their virtual shoulder all the time. And so our experience is that generally the proportion of incorrect things is quite low, less than 10%. And of them, a good number do get picked up by the students anyway, and I think that's a reasonable proportion. And so I think a pitfall would be to meddle too much with the system. I think it's best just to leave it.
Do you have a feel for what you think the main benefits are for students? You've talked about creating questions, answering questions, commenting. Do you have a feel for where the benefit lies?
I think in some regards, having a large collection of questions to answer is good just for having practice and experience with the course materials. And one of the particular benefits of Peerwise is that all of the questions should be drawn directly from your class's own curriculum. So where you might be using external resources, you're dependent on someone having come up with questions that suit your class, whereas here it's automatic. The student should have drawn from the material that you use. But I think the really big benefit is that it's a different kind of learning for the students. It really taps into the creativity. It really asks them to do something that they do quite rarely elsewhere in the courses, to think up things for themselves. And you'll come up with new ideas for questions, identify what might be trouble spots in the course, things they struggled with, things they anticipate other students might do. And that really calls on quite high order cognitive skills, the idea to be creative, to synthesize ideas from different places, to evaluate other people's thinking, your own thinking. And I think it really does stretch the students very, very well. I think that's one of the real big advantages.
Sounds fascinating. So finally, for somebody who's perhaps not tried it and wants to give it a go, are there any places they can go to for help, or any pointers you could give them as to where they might go to try and get some ideas as to?
Yeah, so there's an online community of practice, I think is the term, to be found at peerwise-community.org. So if you go along to that, then it's basically a website with a collection of resources that you might find useful. Collects together activities people have come up with, papers that have been published about Peerwise that give a bit of evaluation of its effectiveness, things like that. There are blog posts detailing what people are doing with the system. There are discussion forums so you can share ideas with other instructors, get ideas. You can just look to see what's happening, but I hope people would get involved, contribute, ask questions, share ideas, make suggestions, and really use this as an opportunity to share what people are doing, what they found effective, what they struggled with, and get ideas that way.
Fantastic. That sounds very fascinating, really interesting, and thanks very much indeed for your time. Thanks a lot, Ross.
My pleasure. Thank you.